Talk and rock radio, where friends meet at the intersection of life, inspiration, and music. Here's your host, Rick Kern.
Welcome, everyone, to Talk and Rock Radio. You know, one of the benefits I enjoy the most about producing these podcast episodes is when I reunite musicians that made their mark in their time and experiences together. Today's show is going to be one of those shows. I've got three very talented guys that you probably know if you follow the El Paso punk rock history. With us today is San Francisco transplant, now living in Clint, Texas, from the Rhythm Pigs, Ed Ivy. From El Paso, Texas is also former Rhythm Pig member Greg Adams. And from Plano, Texas, former member of the punk rock band Teenage Popeye, Mike Nazenso. Welcome, guys. Glad to have you with us today.
Nice to be here.
Hey, Rick. Glad to be here.
How's everybody doing?
Excellent.
Really glad to talk to you.
Are we feeling like rocking today?
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Always. I wake up feeling like that.
Well, you know, what I love about doing this kind of show is reuniting the bands. Some of the best shows that I've done is bringing the bands back together and hearing their stories. And today's not going to be any exception. I really want to hear some great stories from you guys today because I'm sure you've got a bunch of them. Some of them we can't tell on the show, but but we'll get through those. I want to start out first by saying it's 10 years ago that I first met Ed Ivy. He came in from San Francisco and played my number 4 Border Legends of El Paso rock show. He was playing with his cousins, the Singing Ivies, at the Almeida Shrine Auditorium. I think we had probably about 700 or 800 people there that day. It just came off a tour in the last few days, but let's give it up for the Ivies.
We have Mr. Ed Ivy up here on the stage with us. He's still not as popular as my two sisters, but
Yeah.
It was a fun show. What do you remember about that, Ed?
Well, I was really glad to have my cousins there. They're all very talented. And also, it was a great place, Almeida Shrine. That was just a beautiful place. And it was a killer night.
We had a lot of fun with it. You know, that place was Rod and I did 5 concerts there, and then we did 3 at different places. Actually, 2 of them were at Lancers. And then we did 1 out off of Country Club Road at a big hall out there, a big wedding hall. But the Almeida was our favorite because we could really put a lot of people in there. We had a green room for the bands. We had, you know, it was really neat. They had a separate bar in the back room. So a lot of the groups, you know, from high schools, it was like a big high school reunion. You know, they could come in and go into the back bar area and sit around and talk without, you know, having too much loud music. I could go back into the room where the concert was. It was a great show, but particularly exciting for me was to meet the legendary Ed Ivy in that show because, you know, you go back, Ed, so many years with a great band called the Rhythm Pigs, and we're going to talk about, you know, all the bands that you guys impacted punk rock with. And I think before we jump into the stories in your history, specific history about the groups, is that I'm gonna go ahead and ask Mike to kick off what punk rock is. You know, I go back playing drums and singing with pop rock, country rock, jazz, cumbias, heavy metal, folk. I've done all of that. One thing I've never done is punk rock. So I want Mike to talk a little bit about what exactly is punk rock? Tell everybody.
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is it's got nothing to do with fashion. You know, I think it got kind of a bad rap. People thought you had to wear razor blades and have a mohawk. But really, for me, it was just about freedom of expression, offering a format to play and perform original music, and to kind of get away from the corporate rock world and the cover band world. And you know, all of a sudden there was a nationwide scene set up to tour and perform music of your own. If you wanted to, if you were brave enough to.
Well, you know, one of the things I read about with punk rock is that all punk is rock, but not all rock is punk. And what is the definitive answer to that? What would you say? You know, I have my own version of that. First thing I would say about when I watch punk rock, and I'm talking about not a lot of the stuff that you did as the Rhythm Pigs. I mean, some of it you did, but I like some of that rawness that you all put out. I mean, the first thing I see when I see a punk rock group like Ramones and Rhythm Pigs back in the early day is the high energy level. Man, how much coffee or speed did you guys take to play that music?
It wasn't coffee, bro. It was not.
Yeah. It was usually something that people take to mellow out, but we went the opposite direction.
Yeah. There was no Starbucks back in those days, right?
One thing about the punk rock thing in El Paso was basically there was not any punk rock in El Paso until Greg Adams here and some other kids started buying records from California and starting to share the sound, the message of punk rock, and pretty much it exploded into El Paso. And there was also a component of the skater guys, the skate thing. So that was a huge thing. And then, of course, Teenage Popeye was a great band, and you kind of was like, you were kind of like our grandfathers a little bit, because you guys were basically doing something that came out of the New York Dolls and stuff like that. And at the same time, there was other people like the Plugs. What was that guy's name? Tito Del Riva.
And
They
Charlie
were from
Quintana.
Yeah, Charlie Quintana, Chalo Quintana, and all these guys. So there's a really a defined part of El Paso having all of those structures in there. And so
well, you know, you're talking about rock structure back in those days. Of course, you know, with Bobby Fuller and the influence that Bobby's music had in the industry. I mean, when you see a punk rock group like The Clash, for example, that did their version of I Fought the Law, would you consider The Clash as one of the big punk rock bands of the time, or were they trying to be it, or what would you say?
They had commercial success, which is, you know, there weren't a whole lot of punk bands that did that. But when you're talking about the definition of punk and all stuff, and all rock or all punk is rock, not really, man. Punk wasn't defined by a single sound. You know, there's Throbbing Gristle, there's just Einsters and the Neubauten, which was industrial, but that, you know, they were part of the punk scene. There were all these bands that, I mean, the genre, the width of, you know, types of sounds and music that came out of that scene was just phenomenal, you know. And the one thing that I really enjoyed over the, you know, modern rock is that so many of the players that are huge now came out of the punk scene. Yeah. You know, Dave Grohl being originally the drummer for Scream, and Scream were our label mates, you know, in Europe with Concurrent Records. Yeah. And when we lived in DC, you know, that was when Scream was tearing it up there, along with Beef Eater and Minor Threat and all those great bands there. Yeah, right. But talking about going back to the scene here in El Paso, everybody always I've always heard the Plugs were the first one. Well, I don't know if they ever played anywhere. Might have seen them and stuff, but I remember the first time I saw Teenage Popeye, and it was at a Battle of the Bands in the Coliseum. And I'm there with my friends, and but I was a sound man for one of the bands that was competing. And
was that in the mid '80s, Greg?
That was probably what, Mike? Do you remember, like 1980?
1980 sounds right.
I was just out of high school.
Yeah, and all I know is just all these bands were just freaking. No offense to them, but it was kind of lame ass stuff, Magic, President stuff. These guys, great musicians, all good people, all. But man, all I know is when Teenage Popeye got on there, it freaking just blew the freaking doors off the place.
That's right.
You guys just absolutely freaking just made everybody look freaking slow and lazy and dumb, and I don't know what else. And all I know is the energy and freaking everything else. At that moment, I was sold. Absolutely sold. This is what I want to do.
I recently, and I'm going to put some of the video up today of the Teenage Popeye 9 years ago when you guys played at Tricky Falls, and I tell you what, talk about the apple not falling far from the tree. When I see, Kofi Baker playing drums, I mean, of course, his dad, the great Ginger Baker, I mean, to hear this guy play, I mean, you can see the gene was definitely passed on. And I mean, what a great drummer, man. I know your original drummer was Johnny Thompson, Johnny Thunder Evans, but man, Kofi that day was right on, right, Mike?
Well,
he's
I would
right.
say that Kofi is a phenomenal drummer, very close in skill level to his dad. But I got to be honest, two things. In the 4 days we rehearsed, I learned more about polyrhythms than I had in the previous 20 years. That being said, I don't know that there was any place for that in the Teenage Popeye set. It was good. He did a great job. It would have been 100 times better with Johnny Thunder. It was just, he suited the music and fit the mold better. And Kofi was basically filling and sitting in. Johnny knew the tunes. Our tunes, for being punk rock, were pretty well orchestrated and thought out. And, and we weren't able to do the kind of nuanced stuff that was important to us. I wanted to say one thing real quick, because Greg, I don't think, was aware of this, but we had a residency at a little club on the west side of El Paso for about a year called the Winner's Circle. And we brought a lot of bands from out of town in there, right when we were still Teenage Popeye, and the Plugs were one of them. And we brought them in for 3 nights. It was a club that held about 100. We packed 300 people in that place every night for 3 nights. And it was one of my best experiences ever in El Paso, playing with Charlie, rest in peace, and Tito, because Charlie's not with us
anymore. I wanted to say one thing. In El Paso, you could find a punk show at the Rathskeller, and then after that, Art Lewis, the great saxophone guy, would walk in with a couple of guys. And so El Paso had a lot of different stuff going on.
There was a lot of breakout groups back in those days. I mean, you had Long John Hunter over at the lobby playing his phenomenal blues. We had, depending on what part of town you're in, Northeast, West Side, we had the surf music, we had the Hispanic groups. I mean, there were so many good ones, Bobby Rosales, Bobby and the Premiers, you had my band at the Knights Club playing 6 nights a week, and I was talking with Doug Neal about this yesterday, and he reminded me that back in that time, and I'm talking 69 now, when we started there till 72, we played, that was my gig the whole time I was in college, but we had in El Paso it was written up nationwide as being the top dance city in the country at that during that time. We had entertainment at the Knights Club 6 nights a week, and it was my band that was doing it with Jim Reese from the Bobby Fuller Four. I mean, we had a blast. I mean, talk about a wonderful gig for me to be going to college, and then I could go and my drums are already set up every night, go and play the gig, go home, do a little homework, go back to college, do it all over again. Did that for 4 years. So El Paso had a lot of things going on, like you said. Art Lewis, I mean, there was a lot of great musicians all over the place, And of course, Long John Hunter was one of the best. I mean, everybody went over to see Long John. I mean, when the groups came to El Paso to play at the Coliseum or wherever, when they got done, they would go to Juarez. I mean, when Neil Diamond was at UTEP in 1969, the lead singer in my band, Mike Wall, he was a local DJ as well, he and I took Max, the drummer, over to Juarez to see Long John and different bands and stuff over there, because he said, my good friend Bob Dylan wrote a song called Juarez, and I have to go to Juarez so I could tell him next time I see him I was in Juarez, got to see what he wrote about. So that was a fun time. But seeing Long John Hunter was always a treat for all the musicians, because he was everybody knew about him. He had a lot of famous musicians going over there to watch him play and everything. And the very last show that he did was done by a gal named Donna Pence. She brought him to El Paso, and he played a bar up on Mesa Street, and it was great. I'm getting sidetracked, guys, with a lot of this stuff, because I can talk about all that stuff that I know about, but I want to hear more about you all.
Well, I just want to interject one thing before that subject moves on. Like right off the bat, you were talking about how you had played in, all these different styles of music. And then Mike just kind of mentioned how Kofi, talented guy and everything, but it just didn't really fit well. And you had said the one thing he hadn't played is punk. Punk, it wasn't something you could fake. It had to be in you. You were doing it because it's almost like what you had to do. And musicians can be ultra talented and be able to play every genre you can mention, but if they try to play punk, they're not going to pull it off. And you've got to be in a so off of the beaten path, and you're not just doing it because you're going through the motions and you're playing a song. You're doing it because it's from the heart and you're pissed or whatever your motivation is, and it's just pouring out.
And you guys were in the places where you could see it and get exposed to it and catch the bug, right? To be able to be a part of the scene, correct?
Well, it was Mike, he started the scene, and I think by the time I decided I wanted to start a band, I didn't know of any places that were happening. That's why, like, for our first few shows, we booked Sancho Brothers Hall, brought in the Dead Kennedys, brought in Black Flag, brought in some other bands, but there was no place to play. So we made friends with Sancho Brothers and booked their hall. And then at that point, we made friends with Dean Smith, or Dean Small. Anyway,
Dean Small.
Dean Small. That was he owned the Rathskeller.
The old man that had
and Rick Melendez was the manager there. So we just made a deal with them. Let us play here every Friday and Saturday. That's kind of like what you guys had at the Winter Circuit. We just kind of like, hey man, help us out.
At the same time, all of a sudden, punk was really getting big. And when we were playing in the Rathskeller,
I don't know if punk was ever big.
Well, in El Paso, there was a lot of kids who were marginalized by other people, and so they wanted something to do, and punk rock came out. And then later in the 90s, there was a whole bunch of bands coming out kind of with the punk roots, like what's the name of the band, the guy that's Bixler? Oh, Cedric.
Cedric, yeah.
Yeah. And they were just, they went everywhere. I mean,
at the drive-in.
At the drive-in, you're talking about Sleeper Car at the drive-in, those guys, yeah.
And really, I mean, they were world renowned.
Yeah, Jim Ward of Sleeper Car and at the drive-in. I mean, he played my Border Legend show too. He's phenomenal. In fact, just a few weeks ago, I was out at Sonic Ranch, and we had just had dinner with Tony, and I was out there with Terry Manning. He was mixing a group out there from Wisconsin, and in walked Jim Ward. I hadn't seen him for a while, so it was kind of cool. He hadn't seen the new big blue room out there that Tony just put up in the last year or so. Beautiful studio. He now is the owner of the largest recording studio in the world. You know, it's incredible.
That's crazy. You know,
Phenomenal. And of course, you guys recorded out there, right?
We did, yeah. I had my first session out there in 1982 when they just had one little board and stuff like that, and I got a gig to play the bass, and I thought I was, you know, the coolest guy in the world.
They've got 8 of them out there now, Ed. They got eight boards out there now, eight studios. It's phenomenal.
Got everybody's.
Everybody's
famous board.
Yeah. It's great. It's a great place. I love it. You know, one of the fun things that I've really enjoyed about listening to you all, when I say you all, I'm gonna refer to Rhythm Pigs right now, is that how you took some songs that we've all heard, like the theme song from Charlie Brown, you know, Peanuts. You know, and turn that into a punk song, you know, and then the Marlboro Man. I mean, what was the inspiration of taking those songs and making them your own? Who did that? Was that you, Ed, or Greg?
I think it was me and Greg and all the other people. And you know, the punk thing in San Francisco, I mean, I should say in El Paso, was definitely a part of many parts, really.
I'll keep. Yeah, I was riding out here on my horse and I found it. It doesn't matter that people lived here before. God says it's mine.
and for example, there was a band called Red Zone. That was our buddy Rob Norrid, and he was on the harder tip of the punk rock thing, and another guy was John Otto. He called him
John Williams.
John Williams,
Mike Gray,
and Mike Gray, and a bunch of those kids moved out to yeah. So it was a really great, very fertile scene.
We kind of rode on the coattails. For us, we kind of rode on the coattails of the Albuquerque scene, because one of our the bass player for Red Zone was from Albuquerque originally, so he had connections to all the punk rock bands there, Jerry's Kids in particular. So before, actually, I'm not even sure. I think the first place we ever played before we even talked to Brothers Hall was in Albuquerque, right? Because they had a punk scene there, so we went there, and then us and Jerry's Kids became fast friends, and we were playing back and forth. We had them here in El Paso all the time. We were in Albuquerque all the time. We'd go up together to Denver and stuff like that.
And when you talk about punk rock, some of those guys rode the freight trains to get to California.
Dave Duran.
Wow.
Duran, I just ran into him about a month ago. And so anyway, so a lot of these players, they held it on their pet right there on their chest right there. And they were punk rockers.
Let me ask you
I'm not sure.
Let me ask you a question, Ed. You were talking about how you went up to Albuquerque and everything, working with the scene up there. There's a song that you all did called Nomad, and it starts out sounding like a Native American, with the flute playing and everything. Really, really nice. Who wrote that? What was the inspiration of that song?
I think I wrote it.
You wrote it?
Exactly right.
That was, and I can tell you exactly. I actually stole that song from Scratch Acid out of Austin. Although when I played it for Scratch Acid, when we played live with them one time, and I was like, hey, you know what, man, I stole this. This is that song. And they're like, I don't hear it. That doesn't sound like our song at all. I don't know where you think you stole that from, but no, it's not. Anyway, and and I wrote the lyrics as we were driving into Jackson, Mississippi, while in the back of the van.
And who played the recorder on that?
I imagine Ed did. He must have played the recorder.
I think I did. Yeah.
It was really good, man.
know, because in the early 80s, there was no, cell phones and anything. And so we actually we had stolen MCI phone cards that we would hand out to everybody. And then they would have a book full of
we'd have codes.
Codes.
You would
like get your codes.
Yeah.
People would hey man, you got some codes?
Yeah.
That was how you did it. There would be kids like by the dozens hanging around
well, okay. Here's the story. So during the first tour, we're broke. Don't have freaking dime to us. We couldn't even. We're at the Rat. It was the Rathskeller in Boston, and we had zero money freaking to get there. We're Boston, Massachusetts, full of toll roads. We didn't even have money for the fucking toll, and so we're trying to circumvent the toll roads, and we're on 2-lane roads. And finally, it's like, we're going to be late for the show. We got to get on the toll road. And then when we get to the toll gate, guys, like, this much money. It's like, we don't have that, man. Sorry, we don't have fucking penny. We're like, well, what do you have? It's like, well, we got sleeping bags. Okay, I'll fucking take a sleeping bag. Gave the guy a sleeping bag. And we get through the toll by giving the guy a sleeping bag. We get to the Rathskeller, and, we do our sound check. And it's like, can we have a beer? And they're like, no, you got to pay. Until we pay, no credit, no shit. You don't get anything until you pay. So fuck. So I go out in front of the Rathskeller and there's a payphone. So I had some codes. So I just started asking people, hey man, you want to make a long distance call? They're like, yeah, I haven't called my mom in a while. And it's like, okay, dude. And so what's the phone number? So I dial in the code, and it's like, give me a couple of bucks. The guy would talk on the phone. It's like 5 minutes, time's up, man. Bye. And then anybody else, and they're just walking by and like, want to make a long distance call? Want to make a long distance call? Next thing you know, I walk in there with a handful of bills, man. And the guys, and I'm like, give us a picture. And the guys are like, where the fuck did you get the money, man? Wow. Yeah. And next thing you know, we're just having that one picture of beer was like the best thing in the world.
Creative marketing, man.
You got to do what you got to do.
Hey, I want to get back to Mr. Mike Nosenso, because he was my complete idol. No kidding. He was so great on stage. His lyrics
got a repeat
killer
presence.
And we were in awe of Teenage Popeye.
Oh man, they were awesome. I was
the bass player. What was his name? Chip.
Here's Chip.
Yeah, beast on the bass.
Yeah, a beast. And I think I saw him playing later in San Francisco. But anyway, and I think that Teenage Popeye was really important. And a lot of people, I'm just going to say, they ripped you off pretty good, And then there was another band called the Victims, right? Is that Clutch?
Yeah, Victims.
Clutch.
Between 1 second 0.
Yeah, they were more of a dance. New wave. That's right.
Really good band too.
Yeah, great.
All these guys, between Teenage Popeye and they're way more accomplished musicians than us, man. We were just freaking scraping by on our instruments.
Yeah.
These guys were beasts.
I want to ask Mike, with Popeye, when you guys did that reunion show 9 years ago at Tricky Falls, Mike, you had Pierce McDowell on bass that night. You had Blake Harper on guitar, right? Are either one of those guys still playing? Is Blake still playing? Pierce still playing?
Absolutely still playing. I'm working on a project with them right now, and also a couple of songs with Johnny Thunder Evans, the original Teenage Popeye drummer, and Pierce McDowell, the original Teenage Popeye bass player. We've got a couple songs in the mix, and I just wanted to take a minute and say that I'm very humbled by those kind words from Ed. And I want to say that that's come full circle, because I learned a lot from him when I was playing with him, particularly about American roots music like Dylan and Doc Watson. And I owe him a real debt of gratitude for that,
Well,
I think when you're in El Paso with all these types of things going on in the music scene, it's you can see why it develops that way. And you know, I think that everybody. I mean, I remember watching Mario Otero playing at the Jersey Lily and just knocking them down, and Cancellari, he's another one.
Oh,
And
wow.
all of these things, we're not really talking about punk right now, but believe me, Cancellari was a very punk brother. Don't worry about that. He was full of angst and ready to blow up, and so I think all of us ingested a lot of that from those guys back in the.
I played with Mike some, and you know, of course, he played with the Wailing Wall. You know, he was with those guys some. You know, Doug and Daryl and some really great players there. Mario Otero, man, the guy is still phenomenal. He's like a good wine. He just keeps getting better and better.
He's like 90 years old. No, not really.
Well, he's a phenomenal guy, a great musician. He's played my Border Legend show before, and he's still gigging, man. He's still working with Randy Russ some, and they're having a good time. Doug Neal and Andre Bonaguidi go over to his studio all the time and jam, and good musicians, man. You can't keep them down. They keep playing, you know, doing their thing.
You're right about that. And I just want to say one more thing. Rod Crosby was the backbone for anybody who needed to get gear, or, you know, plus we did a great recording right there at Rod's
Rosewood. Yeah.
At Rosewood, Rosewood. And you know, I think that, you know, Rod was a heavy dose for all of us.
Rod was a great guy, man. I miss him. I miss him tremendously. You know, he'll never be forgotten. That's for sure. Anyway, let's talk more about. I want to talk about Mike's song. There's one song that he did called "Psychic Driving." Did you write that song, Mike?
Pierce, the bass player from Teenage Popeye, and I wrote that together. That actually started with the bass line that you hear that begins the song. Then I added guitar, and I wrote the lyrics for that song based on my reading about the CIA's MK Ultra program. It was a program of mind control by the CIA, all those LSD experiments and stuff that you read about now. But yep, everything in Teenage Popeye was a collaboration. I mean, oftentimes John and Chip would get together and work out the rhythm section and bring in a finished song that just needed guitar and vocals, and they would leave that to me. I want to also say that both of the guys I played with, John and Pierce, were much more technically advanced musically than I was. They're really trained, excellent musicians. And when we first went on the road and then relocated to Austin, there were a lot of people in the punk rock community that held that against us. Like, we knew a diminished chord was a no-no, you know, and the fact that I used a strobo tuner just used to make people crazy. You know, what the hell do you need that for, man? Just play, you know? But I was lucky to have joined up with those fellas. That's basically what I'm saying.
Another song that you guys did that I really like is Tomorrow Never Knows, the Beatles song. You did a great job on that one.
Well, thank you very much. And I would say once again that most of that was Pierce McDowell's. Innovations. He had just gotten some very rudimentary synthesizers and sequencers, and he put that whole thing together. That's really his baby right there.
A few days ago, I was talking to Robin Vinikoff. You all remember Robin?
Oh yeah, of course.
He was another kind of a Rod Crosby type. Of course, he spent most of his time up in Albuquerque. And he called me about 2 or 3 days ago. In fact, I shared this story with Mike already a little bit, but it blew my mind because as I'm talking with Robin, then I went online and I was looking at some of the YouTube videos of a band called The Fabulous Checkers. And he was the sound man for that band for many years. He did the backline, front of house, everything for the group. And a really, really fine group. It reminds me a lot of the band called El Paso, the El Paso band. They play a lot of Malo and stuff like that. But in the conversation, he's talking to me about this guy named Blake Harper. And I'm going, are you kidding me? I said, we were just talking about that the other day. I was talking with Mike from Teenage Popeye, and I'm just going, wow, it's a small world because of all the days for Robin to call me. I hadn't talked to him in years, and he just wanted to call and chat for a while. And then the name came up, and then I shared this with Mike the other day about Blake Harper, how he had played with Popeye, and then he was a guitar player for this band, the Fabulous Checkers, which reminds me, you guys are such phenomenal musicians because you not only played some of the best punk music back in its day, but you still play other kinds of genres, you know. And I look at this guy Ed Ivy, you know, sitting in front of me here, and I mean, one of the best brass players in the business. I mean, and he still played with a group in the Bay Area. You know, are you still playing with him? I know you're down here now, Ed. Are you still playing with him?
I decided not to. I decided to leave the Bay Area for a few different reasons. My mom is getting up in years, and I want to be with her as much as I can. And also, the Bay Area is a mess. I happen to be a partner in a restaurant in San Francisco, and we're still at it. My partner is taking care of it, and I decided to hang around with my mom. But anyway, San Francisco has lost a little bit of its luster, I could say, and it's just because of, you know, whatever the patterns are. But anyway, it was great. I mean, I cherish every experience about being a player in San Francisco for so many years, especially as a tuba player, because that was what I started doing, and I love it a lot. And maybe I'll have to go to Juarez and get into the banda.
Orale, I'll go play some cumbias with you, man.
Let's go.
We'll work for Tecate and Fred sandwiches, right?
Yes, sir.
There you go.
But I want to also, I also want to tell you that one of the standouts for me is Greg Adams, because he always knew what to do. We had some really letdowns. We got ripped off. We got pulled over by the Canadian Customs, and they were going to take me to the brig. Yeah, I mean, they found a picture or a flyer.
It was a postcard.
It was a postcard, yeah. And it was
a band called Priapism out of New York City. They gave us a whole bunch of these postcards.
Right. And they said, oh, this is pornography.
Child pornography.
Yeah.
It was obviously photoshopped photo of a little kid, a naked kid from back in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
Who schlong went on the ground and for another 3 feet, you know. So they see these and they're like, that's child pornography. So they were in his suitcase.
They hauled me in.
So they locked him up.
Another Ginger Baker moment, right? Remember Blind Faith?
You know what? Yeah, exactly. I forgot about that thing.
I've got that album.
Okay.
We were, and what's crazy though, it was at a remote border. I want to say it was in Minnesota. I think it was in Minnesota.
Emerson.
And so there was no town nearby because we were going to our gig that we were playing that night in Regina. It was Regina with social unrest. So we're sitting there waiting for this. So they had to bring in a guy from the nearest town to come pick up Ed out of the cell so this guy could lock up for the night, because it was just a one-man post, so remote. And finally, this guy's like, man, it's 5 o'clock. I want to go home and have dinner. Screw it. He lets Ed out. And so he gets in the truck and we fly out of there. And as we're flying out of there, here comes the guy who was coming to pick up Ed.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
On the road.
Right. See you later.
I was like, pedal to the metal, man. Get the hell out of here before they change your mind.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, well, this is all, that's what happens when you're up against the punk rock, basically.
Yeah, I can't.
Anything can happen.
We got served. We wouldn't get served in restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was, just yeah. It was always something that
I remember
when you're on tour.
Oh, well, we were, one time we had a couple of kids with us eating at a Denny's, and the cops, somewhere in Ohio, I guess, and they said, okay, you guys have to get out of right here now. Stand up right now and get out of here right now.
Kansas City.
And I was already 27 years old and, running the show. And I was just, I was like, man, this is what it's all about.
I remember in 1974, your story reminded me of, we were going into Canada for one of our tours, and we all had vans, and my van had all my drum kit and everything. And I remember at the checkpoint, the officer said, pull over, please. I want, and so I pulled over, and I had to pull everything out of the van. Obviously we're a bunch of hippies, we just, because he smelled something, and he said, what's that smell? And so he tracks it down, and it was a little metal vial thing of patchouli oil that my wife used as a perfume. And he said, what is this? What is this stuff?
Really were a hippie.
And she goes, that's patchouli oil. And he goes, no, that ain't patchouli oil and all that. So he wouldn't know patchouli from a chocolate bar, But anyway, it was one of our similar moments that you're talking about. We were under the magnifying glass, and that wasn't the first time,
I wanted to tell you one impression that I'll never forget, a great impression. One day I saw this lady, and she had a gigantic mohawk, and she was walking down in Eastwood. She was walking down, I don't know, and I just turned around and I said, hey, who are you? And that turned out to be Laura Landau. Yeah, we call her Sporcha. That was her punk name. And that was one thing about the scene was very much integrated with punks and goths and preppies and just regular little players, and it really turned into a big thing, and I think we probably had a little effect of the other bands like Mars, Volta, and some of these other bands, and in fact, we one time they gave us our pops, hey man, you guys are our punk rock grandfathers. Yeah, something how I don't know, but anyway, I think that the scene in El Paso, all the kids in the El Paso scene were really great, and a few of them came out from San Diego to hang out because they wanted to be in our scene.
Nice.
So, yeah.
And 9 years ago, when you all did that reunion show at Tricky Falls, Mike, what do you remember the most about that night? I know you had some of the Pigs were there. What was the crowd like that night? Were they excited to see Teenage Popeye again, or did a lot of them not know who you guys were?
The night before the show, there was a terrible freeze and a terrible winter storm. I mean, just a horrible storm. I mean, still pretty much ice covered the day we did the show, and it was a terrible turnout, I'll tell you the truth. Tricky Falls is a large place, it's a big venue. I couldn't tell you how many people came that night, but if it was 200, I would have been shocked.
Wow.
But the 200 seemed to make a lot of noise and have a good time, and we definitely enjoyed ourselves.
Oh, so, You were having a great time, man. I tell you, I love the video of you with your lighted headgear on. That was kind of cool.
Well, that was actually a Christmas ornament my parents used to hang over the outside in front of the front door. And, I found it in the attic and I said, no, I wish I could wear this. And my brother, who was a bit of a idiot savant, rigged it up and I plugged it in. By the time, if you watch that video, you can see at the end of the song, I run away from the microphone. I ripped it off my head because I hadn't tried it. And it was so hot, I was afraid my scalp was on fire. By the time if nothing more, to see Ed again and just be on the same stage, that dividend I will never forget. It was a blast, and Blake joined us that night. He's the first guy I met when I moved to El Paso in '69. He's a great guitarist. So.
And he's one of your best friends still, right?
He is my best friend. Yeah.
That's great. Where does he live now?
He's a guitarist for hire in Albuquerque. He plays with a group called the Panhandlers. They play out almost every week, and he's something of a hired gun as well.
Nice.
He's not just a guitarist. He plays mandolin, dobro, little lap steel. He's a versatile musician. Hey, Rick, I wanted to mention when you were talking earlier about the Rhythm Pigs doing the Peanuts theme, Marlboro Man, I wanted to mention that how funny how things come full circle, because in Piggy Bank, we used to take hardcore punk songs like a Sex Pistols song, and we would do them country. We would
wow.
Anarchy in the UK. Right.
That's pretty cool. That's cool.
But you know what was great about that band is because of all of us, I mean, punk was just, it's what we were, it's what was in us. So every time we played a song, it was not true to the original. I mean, it was the song, but it was definitely with a punk attitude. And I think that's what made that band so much freaking fun, man. Because there was nothing about like, we've got to nail it exactly like the original. No, we were like, okay, we let each other. I mean, it was all open to just however we were going to attack the song, and that was so much fun.
I think that's what I like the most about the song Marlboro Man, is because here I'm hearing that theme song throughout it, and then all of a sudden you guys break into a manic state, which is what really was so cool about it, and then you transition out of it again, and then Ed's, I think it sounded like Ed, where you're saying, and I'm going to keep it, or we're going to keep it, or something like that. I'm trying to.
Yeah, I'll keep it.
I think I'll keep it. The West.
Yeah, that's it.
I think I'll keep it.
Yeah.
And by the way, I wanted to mention something. I saw the Los Lobos at a place in a transmission shop. Kent Bales had a place on the east side. Did you ever see any of those shows?
No.
Well, I guess it was probably 81 or something like that. But that was the first time I saw a real show, kind of punk, and so I wondered if anybody knew about that. But yeah, it was
no, and I bet you Charlie was drumming.
Oh, of course he was. Yeah.
Who's that?
Charlie Quintana was probably drumming for him.
Yeah,
because he would go in and out of with them. But Charlie Quintana's list of musicians he played with,
Dylan,
Bob Dylan. I mean, just that guy played with some legends. If you ever look at his
IMDb
list of bands and musicians he played for, it's phenomenal, just amazing. Guy was
just down the street from me, behind Burgess High School over there. I met him when he was 12 years old, and my brother came home and said, "You got to jam with this buddy of mine." And he was a kid. I mean, just I couldn't believe it. Hell of a drummer.
Is he still around, Greg?
He passed away.
Oh, he passed away? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say I never knew him. I don't know, maybe because it was when I was on the road or something. I don't know. I don't know his history.
And
that's just a couple of years.
Him, and also a mutual friend with Mike was Jerry Gomez.
Oh yeah.
And Jerry Gomez, he wasn't a musician, but the guy was actually kind of integral to the scene here because of his friendship with Charlie and the Floods. He moved out with them to LA, and that's when that punk scene was just, starting to take off and everything. And Floods were influential out there in LA. And so Jerry ended up working for X and some of those early LA heavy hitter punk bands.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, guys, this has been an absolute gas visiting with you, rock stars.
Oh,
You guys paved the way, and I so appreciate you sharing some of your stories with us today. I've still got to edit in some of the music and everything to finish up the show, but thank you for sharing your passion for music, what you've done, what you've accomplished. I really appreciate you guys.
Hey man, you know what? It's great for you to have us on, and you're doing a great service for the whole world, really, because it's going all around. And El Paso is well represented by yourself.
Thanks, Rick. I mean, what you're doing, definitely appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate what you do.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. Mike, it's been an absolute gas getting to know you, my new friend, and Greg and Ed. You guys rock. Keep doing what you're doing. Even if it's not punk rock, you all are still great musicians. Keep doing and keep your passion going. And let's stay in touch, okay?
You got it.
Thanks for getting us all together. I love seeing you guys. I miss you both terribly.
Hey, miss you too, Mike.
Yeah, Mike. Come visit.
I'm going to do that. I promise.
All right.
It's been an honor. We'll see you guys later.
Right on.
Okay, y'all take care.
Take care. Bye-bye now.